Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to another episode of Pinot with Phoenix for June 2024. Hard to believe another month has gone by. So it's been a very busy month on the channel, including something I've never tried before. So now we're going to recap it all. Let's recap it all. So kick back, relax, and grab a drink. I've of course got my Crystal Light just off shot, but let's jump right into recapping the games. And we'll start with the first game of the month, recapping with Inside the Crease Hockey. Inside the Crease Hockey is a game by Inside Sports Games that, you guessed it, it's a hockey simulator. For this one, we went back to the 2000-2001 season as we replayed essentially Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals between the Colorado Avalanche and the New Jersey Devils. Colorado won a shootout 8-5. I did watch the game live back in 2001. Colorado won that one 3-1 historically. I really enjoyed Inside the Crease Hockey, but it was still a very long game. The layout also was very busy on that one, but it seemed manageable. I think it helped trading in having all the lines out there and using the blocks to track the line changes for it flowing quite a bit faster than, say, APA Hockey. But we are going to come back to APA Hockey. Anyway, next game we played on the channel was our commemoration of D-Day, as we played D-Day Dice from... Who made D-Day Dice? I forget who. Let me look that up real quick and find out. Normally, I try to know this stuff off the top of my head. The geek is not wanting to cooperate with me. Here we go. D-Day Dice. I think we were playing 2nd edition. So we'll go with that one. It was made by WordForge Games. So D-Day Dice by WordForge Games is a dice game where you're controlling the forces of one of the allied countries, the United States, Britain, Canada, or France, where you're playing through various scenarios in D-Day. So this one was a very strange game where it was a dice game. It's kind of a hybrid for me. When it comes to these dice games, there's very much a weird hybrid for me, where when it's a dice game like this, it really depends on what the dice are doing in terms of my reaction to it. So if a dice game tends to influence your resources and that's what you have to work from, I'm a little bit warmer to that. Whereas if the dice are influencing your actions and what actions you can take in a turn, I don't tend to like those games as much. Because the problem you run into with the games where the dice determine your actions is you're really kind of tied into what the dice tell you you're able to do. So if there's something you really need to be able to do, you're all of a sudden looking at a situation where, well, I hope I roll this, whatever I need to do. For instance, if I need, say in Tiny Epic Galaxies, I needed an advance action on an economy planet, but I didn't roll that, then I wouldn't be able to do that. Then I wouldn't be able to do that for the turn, except through some kind of mitigation, which I think Tiny Epic Galaxies had a way you could spend 2 of your unspent dice and get one and be able to change a die to whatever face you want. So it essentially costs you 3 dice, but there is mitigation available. There isn't really any of that mitigation in D-Day Dice, where, yes, you lock your initial dice, but on the same token, you're very much tied in to those resources, and because of how you have to manage your courage to be able to advance, you can get into a situation where if you don't roll the right resources on your dice, you're going to find yourself stuck in a hurry. And in that way, the dice kind of influence both your resources and the actions you can take. So I think that's where I didn't like this game all that much, where it ended up being way too easy, at least for me, to get stuck in there. And that's what ended up happening. Well, we didn't necessarily get stuck, but we definitely got mowed down once we ended up being vulnerable to machine gun fire. So that caused us a lot of problems. As such, I don't think this one's going to hit the channel again. Like I said, it was that weird hybrid of it controls your resources, but also influences your actions in that way. So, not a big hit for me. Anyway, next up on the games, we played APA Hockey from APA Games, and just like Inside the Crease Hockey, this one's another hockey simulator. For a rare treat in APA Hockey, in this one, we actually did a college hockey game where I have the 2022-23 college hockey season for APA. So we decided to take out a college matchup for this one. We went with Michigan and Michigan Tech. Michigan ended up winning this one by a score of 5-1. as you probably guessed with Inside the Crease Hockey when I was talking about that, hockey is very much a sprawling mess on the channel where I've not gotten to a layout that I like with that game at all. I have picked up Shootout Hockey, and I'm starting to explore that one a little bit more. So that one may get to the channel at some point. We'll have to see how that goes. But I have a feeling that unless it's with Shootout Hockey, or I think I can get my Inside the Crease hockey games down, I don't see myself doing any kind of hockey season replay. Definitely not with APA, for sure. Like I said, Inside the Crease maybe, if I can get the time of the games down a little. Well, I'm actually not too far, at least on that first game, from where I'd want to be for a season replay. I tend to want to be in that hour and a half max before I warm up to doing any kind of season replay. So I still need to get my Inside the Crease hockey time down a little bit before I warm up to that idea. I do see myself doing exhibition games of both APA and Inside the Crease hockey. So we're not going to completely get away from hockey. I may keep playing around with the layout a little bit just to see what I think in terms of maybe getting a hockey replay on the channel. But that's it for APA Hockey. Next up, we're going to move into what turned into game number 5 on my Tack Up Wargaming list as we played Target for Today. Target for Today by Legion Wargames is basically an air war game set over the skies of World War II Europe. And yes, you probably heard the air quotes slam into place. We're going to come back to that fact. So in terms of how this mission went, we ended up getting the Phoenix's Fury shot down and most of the crew captured. So this mission didn't go well. The Phoenix's Fury is now in need of both major repairs and a new crew. So now let's come back to that idea of you probably heard the air quotes slamming into place around game. So and some of this might be that I was just a little bit salty about how my how that mission of Target for Today went, but it almost feels to me like it's kind of glorified storytelling in a sense, where the player largely has no agency whatsoever in this game. You aren't really influencing anything. I feel like it's almost like you're it's almost like you're in a movie and you have really no control over what happens to you. Now, I do really like the narrative aspect of it, but I think that a complete lack of player agency in the game is really kind of causing me to start to turn a little bit on Target for Today. So it may be a while before we come back to this one on the channel, but we probably will get at least one more mission in with the Phoenix's Fury just to see, okay, is there something here that I do kind of like. But that will do it for Target for Today. Next up, we put our second football game on the channel as we played Inside Blitz Football. Just like with Inside the Crease Hockey, this one is also from Inside Sports Games and is also a football simulator. For this one, we went back to 2006 with the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears, replaying Super Bowl 46, I think. Let me double check that. I believe it was Super Bowl 46. Let's see, NFL. I'm just looking this up real quick. Come on. Sports Reference isn't wanting to load for me in case you're wondering what's going. Oh, for crying out loud. Come on. All right, well, where there's a will, there's a way. There's another way we should be able to get at this. It was the 2006 Super Bowl. I do remember that. And it's still going to act up. Let's see. No. Here we go. Super Bowl 46. Actually, Super Bowl 41, I should say. In 2007 for the 2006 season, which the Colts historically won that one 29-17 over Chicago. We were at a point where Indianapolis was leading 7-3 before I tapped out on Inside Blitz Football because it was just turning into a way too long video. Some of that is just me not having the experience with Inside Blitz Football that I normally like having before I get a game to the channel. Another part of it is just that it was very much a sprawling mess, and I've heard a lot of people say that when it comes to Inside Blitz Football, they like the PC version better than Cards and Dice. So maybe we'll explore that at some point. It definitely caused me to abort one of my scheduled videos because I was planning on playing APA football this month, the week after I did Inside Blitz football. But Inside Blitz football turned out to be such a disaster that I ended up aborting the APA football video altogether. We may come back to that at some point, but I think that's going to be a little while down the road, and I will spend a little more time with APA football before I put that on the channel. That's it for APA football. I'm going to take a small break so I can take a sip from my drink before we talk about Aeon's End. Aeon's End by Indie Boards and Cards is a deck building game. Puts us in the role of Magi defending Gravehold from the Nameless. The really unique thing about Aeon's End, for those of you who have never played before, is it's not a traditional deck builder in the sense of when you run out of cards in your deck, you shuffle your deck. You actually just take your discard pile and flip it over to form your new deck. So the strategy is actually in manipulating what order your stuff goes to your discard pile, so you can draw stuff when you potentially need it in subsequent runs through your deck. So that's your strategy there. We took Nyrisia and Solidia out again against Wraithmonger, and it was definitely looking a little bit dicey toward the end there, but we did manage to pull it off in the end, and I really do enjoy Aeon's End. I talked about it briefly at the end of that video, but Nyrisia and Solidia as Magi from Aeon's End Legacy are usable at the end after the campaign's over. I talked about it briefly, but those two tend to take a lot more of the power cards on the chin than they probably should. But it is balanced out by the fact that those two just crank out so much damage, especially Nyrisia, once she gets her Dark Blessing going, and Rage of the Sith from when she focuses her breaches, she just cranks out the damage from that as well. So the two of them, like I said, do take more of the power cards on the chin, but they've also got more tools available to them where they can help potentially keep minions under control, where they'll be able to keep damage on the boss when with the normal Magi, you would probably have to move damage off the bosses to deal with some of the adds that come out during the fight. But I do still really enjoy this game, and I'm having some thoughts about the fall campaign, but we'll come back to that during August's episode of Pinot with Phoenix. Anyway, that's it for Aeon's End. Now let's talk a little bit about Zero Leader, which was just I believe the second leader game that I've ever put on the channel. So Zero Leader from DVG puts you in charge of a Japanese squadron of planes during World War II, and you're running through a campaign with a very heavy RPG aspect to it, which I really enjoy that. I've always kind of enjoyed RPGs, especially in the video game world, like your Final Fantasies and some of your other lesser-known games, but mainly Final Fantasy. So I really do enjoy this one, and the campaign that we did, I actually got kind of lucky. I was getting ready to start a new campaign in Zero Leader with the Pearl Harbor campaign, but I got lucky because I still had the campaign sheet from my very first learning mission when I did Pearl Harbor, and so I was able to pull that out and dust it off for the channel, where I just ended up finishing up that campaign and kind of being done with it at that point. Now, I do really want to start running through some of these Leader Series games, some of the actual campaigns on the channel, rather than just doing one-off missions. I've been doing one-off missions, A, to see if I like the series, and B, to get the feel for scheduling everything out for potentially doing an actual full campaign of the Leader Series games. So we'll definitely come back to that idea, but we'll table that one for now. Anyway, next up we went back to speaking of the World War II Pacific, we actually went back to Mag 23 Guadalcanal from Historic Wings earlier today. Similar to Zero Leader, you're in control of a squadron of fighters and bombers, but unlike in Zero Leader where you're controlling the Japanese, you're actually back to the US side this time, where you're controlling a squad of your F4F Wildcats, your P400 era, I believe the P400s are the Era Cobras, and then the SBD Dauntless craft. For the first day, we had a mission of escorted transports to start week 2. And I ended up wanting to just take a couple shots at one of the destroyers there and Gitfo, mainly because we were taking inexperienced pilots out there, where I didn't want to hang around too long, because I didn't want to let the anti-air get a good look at it, but a bunch of inexperienced pilots where they could very easily hack those pilots out of the sky. Maybe a little bit later, as those pilots get more experience, I might let them hunt a little bit more. But for now, I just decided that an early hit and break was probably the best strategy. And I do really enjoy watching the narrative unfold, especially with Shadow's story, as most of week 1 was featuring a lot of the Wildcats, and Shadow's ending up near ace status, actually, surprisingly. I was figuring he'd get hacked out of the sky by now, but he had to pick up a promotion in blood, as one of our flight leaders actually ended up taking a serious wound and getting transferred out. So Shadow ended up getting a bloodied promotion up to flight leader status. So that's enough rambling on Mag 23 Guadalcanal. Next, let's look at my 1991 playoffs in payoff pitch baseball. Payoff pitch baseball from Sideline Strategy Games, like you'd probably guess, baseball simulator. Now, when I talk about doing the playoffs on the channel for the 1991 season, what you have to remember about that, and most of you probably do remember that, is it's actually accompanied by a full season replay beforehand. We'll come back to the season replay aspect of it later on, probably in just a couple minutes here. But let's go ahead and take a look at the most updated brackets. Well, first we'll take a look at the standings that we went into the playoffs with. So it might be a little bit hard to read. Let me zoom in on the standings here so we can see that. So in the AL East, the Toronto Blue Jays actually won the division, with the Detroit Tigers also making the playoffs as the 4 seed, by virtue of a better board record over the Minnesota Twins. Board record being the games I featured on Facebook. The Toronto Blue Jays actually ended up with home field advantage throughout the AL playoffs. In the AL West, the Minnesota Twins won their division at the same record as the Blue Jays, with the Athletics and the Royals making the playoffs as well. In the NL East, the Pittsburgh Pirates very much ran away with both the National League and the division. They won the division by 23 games over the Mets. In addition to the Pirates and the Mets, the St. Louis Cardinals also made the playoffs. Looking in the NL West, the Los Angeles Dodgers also won the NL West by 9 games over the Braves, and they were hot on the heels of the Pirates for home field advantage in the National League playoffs. But the Pirates, of course, won that race by 5 games over the Dodgers. So now moving into the playoffs, we actually started with the American League wildcard game between the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers. The 6th seed would have been the Milwaukee Brewers, but they finished 2 games under 500, so they didn't end up making the playoffs. So, anyway. And the 6th seed in the National League would have been the San Francisco Giants, but they finished even further under 500 than the Brewers did. So neither league had a 6th seed in them for a second wildcard game. Anyway, the Tigers and the Royals were the wildcard game in the American League. Kansas City won that one 5-4, I believe the final score was. They advanced to play the Blue Jays in the American League Division Series, whereas the Minnesota Twins were playing against the Oakland Athletics in the other ALDS. In the National League, the St. Louis Cardinals ended up going to Shea Stadium and getting hammered by the Mets in an 11-4 drubbing, and the Mets advanced to play the Pittsburgh Pirates in the other NLDS. The Dodgers and the Braves were playing in the other NLDS. Looking at our NLDS round, the Twins actually were the historical World Series winners, but they were the first team eliminated from the playoffs, as the Oakland Athletics swept the Twins out of the playoffs behind the performance of Dennis Eckersley. Eckersley ended up picking up a win and a save in that series. Then in the other ALDS, Kansas City handled Toronto in 4 games, winning that one by a score of 3-1. So far we are 0-2 on division winners. Moving into the National League, it's not going to get any better for historical division winners, because the Los Angeles Dodgers, who were the 2 seed, knocked out the Atlanta Braves, who were the 3 seed, in a 3-1 score. So the Braves were also in the NLCS historically, but they didn't make the LCS round in this replay. The Pittsburgh Pirates, of the 4 division winners, the historical division winners were the Twins, the Blue Jays, the Braves, and the Pirates. The Pirates were the only historical division series winner, or the division winner, to make the LCS round, as they handled the Mets by a final series score of 3-1. The Mets actually won Game 2 in that series before the Pirates came back and handled business in the last 2 games of the series. The Dodgers ended up with, I think, the Royals and the Blue Jays also tied at 1 game apiece before Kansas City won 2 straight. Dodgers got out to a 2-0 lead before the Braves made it interesting in Game 3, and then the Dodgers handled business in Game 4. As for the LCS round, we see currently that the Oakland Athletics are up 2-0 on the Kansas City Royals, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are up 2-0 on the Dodgers in the NLCS. Digging into those series, however, we see 2 very different stories, and I was just tabulating this earlier. In the ALCS, the combined score for the 2 games is 7-6. Now, given the way those games have played out, especially Game 2, a ball here or a bounce there, we're easily looking at a 1-1 series in the American League, or potentially a 2-0 Kansas City series, depending on how differently Game 1 goes. But I feel like that series is deceptively what's the word I want? Deceptively close, I don't think is the word I want. That series feels very close, where it could very easily be a 1-1 series. The National League Championship Series, however, is very much another story, as the Dodgers have been outscored in that series by a combined score of 16-3 through 2 games. It's almost like the bell sounded, the Pirates woke up, and the Dodgers were like, oh wait, the series started? If that continues for the Dodgers, then we're going to be looking at a short NLCS and potentially getting ready for a quick World Series on that one. But that's it for my payoff pitch replay, so let's bring it back up top. And I do have a special topic. I have a couple special topics I want to talk about during this month's Pinot with Phoenix. So I normally talk about these after Ask Me Anything, but as this first topic pertains to the season replays, and we just talked about the 1991 payoff pitch replay, we're actually going to talk about it now. So let's talk about future baseball season replays. Sorry, a little bit of a dry throat. So for those of you who might be happening on Pinot with Phoenix for the first time, and you haven't heard the story yet, I apologize if you're in the chat, Jester, but you've heard this story countless times by now. But I do want to tell it for the new people to the channel to bring them up to speed on what's going on. So back in March, I was starting to get things ready for a baseball season replay because I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. So I wanted to do some testing on what I was targeting as my block days. Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Saturday were going to be my block days. So testing for that week went very well, where I played a different baseball game each day of that week. But in the immediate aftermath of that, I ended up getting sick. I ended up catching a little bit of a bug. I noticed it in the Plum Island horror video that I shot immediately after that, but it was absolutely miserable in the Wednesday video that week. I was going to play Heat Pedal to the Metal back in March, but I ended up rescheduling that video because I ended up with a cold and I just couldn't go ahead with it. So I was feeling better after about a week, to the point where I was satisfied that the bug I caught was caused by up and down temperatures that we'd been having around that time, not by A, catching any kind of nastier bug than that, or B, running myself into the ground that week. As a final test, though, I decided to run a full season replay off channel just to make sure that both my body and my schedule were going to handle what I was going to ask of them during a full season replay. And I've been doing the 91 season using Payoff Pitch Baseball, as that's the season I went through on the channel, for the replay. I was talking with Jester about it when I was getting closer to the playoffs, and he suggested that I put the playoffs on the channel. I hesitated at the idea because I thought it was going to seem confusing to people, where you'd have the playoffs going in for it, but you wouldn't have the context behind the playoffs and how we got there. But I decided to go ahead with the idea mostly because that then let me add in the video component to the testing, where I could see, okay, how am I going to be able to make the videos in terms of being able to handle everything in the course of a day. So I've got my full work day. I come home, usually get a workout in of some kind. Then I'm doing other things around the apartment maybe, and then I record the aforementioned video. So I wanted to make sure that would interact well with everything. So how are things going on that front? We're slightly past the halfway point of the playoffs. The full season would have taken a bit longer. I am expecting it to be about a 3.5 month replay project is what I'm expecting on that. Things seem to be going very well so far, but I'll have a better idea of that probably in July, after I have the conclusion of the 1991 World Series. As a preliminary judgment, though, I think both my body and my schedule will handle what I'm going to ask of them during a full season replay. But we're going to come back to that idea during next month's Pinot with Phoenix after the replay ends. Unless something radically changes, though, I do expect to be doing more baseball season replays on the channel. Speaking of that, I do want to tip my hand on something. So if you haven't already seen, I am running a giveaway for subscribers to the channel because I'm getting close to 500 subscribers. You can find that video on the channel, and you'll see how to enter the giveaway if you're interested in winning a copy of Cartographers. As far as how I'm having you enter this giveaway, the baseball season that you're suggesting to me are going onto a list for executive picks. So let me explain what I mean by that. My initial thought right now on how I want to do these replays is I want to do 2 replays per year. The plan right now is I'm going to pick one, and then the audience is going to help me pick the other. And the list of seasons that you're suggesting in that replay are going to go into that executive pick list that I'm going to pick from for the time being. So if you want to influence what baseball seasons hit the channel, now's the time you might want to do that. We're 27 minutes in already, and somehow we haven't gotten to this yet. So let's go ahead and recap Mystical Munchies. For Mystical Munchies on the month, we were cooking out of the Fallout official Vault Dwellers cookbook, and here's how the recipes went. For the appetizer, we made mystery meat-wrapped nukalurk, aka bacon-wrapped scallops. The scallops were good, but very small, and a lot of that was influenced by the size of the scallops I was able to get a hold of at the grocery store. So this is definitely influenced by how big a scallops you find. As far as the side goes, we were making blue cornbread muffins. The spices actually seemed a little bit floury, and one of my buddies at work mentioned this to me, and I guess I kind of remembered picking that out during the taste test. It was a weird combination of spices. It didn't taste bad, just a little bit different is all. For the entree, we made Meyerlurk queen steak, which is also known as crab stuffed salmon. And I really actually liked the salmon flavor especially. The crab meat wasn't too overwhelming actually, and I really enjoyed the recipe. I could see using this again. For the dessert, we made berry crumble. This was not very good at all. It ended up being very liquidy, and I think I needed more of a thickening agent in there. So I think that's a lot of the problem where it turned out very liquidy. As far as the drink goes, we made Deezer's lemonade. It's good. It tasted okay, but the seeds still got through the strainer, so I think the strainer probably wasn't fine enough to keep the seeds from getting through, which also made cleanup a pain in the neck. So that's it for Mystical Munchies. Ask Me Anything. I didn't have any Ask Me Anything questions this month, but how you get a question on the recap on Pinot with Phoenix for Ask Me Anything is during any video starting from now until the last video of the month before the next Pinot with Phoenix, and I need to get better about announcing these. You can leave a question in any video with an AMA tag on it, so I'll know it's for this segment, and as long as it's not deemed too personal, I will answer it. As far as what a question I would deem too personal for Ask Me Anything, just use a little bit of common sense. Basically, the rule of thumb I use, and I tell people, is if you wouldn't want it asked of you, don't ask it of me. Kind of pretty simple, but otherwise, I'll be open to answering a lot of questions. Anyway, I do have another special topic that I want to talk about, so let's transition to some musings I've been having about potentially adding another game night to the channel. In a way, though, I already have added several game nights to the channel with the 1991 playoffs from my season replay. But what I'm talking about here is the non-sports gaming, essentially what Wednesday is now. I'm getting a very good feel for how to run with multiple videos, even after having to change my video editor a couple months back. And I also have a lot of smaller games that have campaign structures to them. So like your Leader Series, your Historic Wings, even Anne's End Legacy potentially, stuff like that. Where these become relevant is in the day I'm looking to add to the channel once the 1991 season is over, and in any off-season, assuming I go ahead with those replays. This would also be helpful for December if I decided to have another Advent of the Phoenix this year, which I very well might do, but I'll know more for sure when I get closer to that. Anyway, coming back to the new game day, I'm looking at potentially adding Saturday as a game day. Obviously, the first logistical concern there is with Mystical Munchies, but that's an easy problem to solve because I can start into the game while Mystical Munchies, assuming I don't have any other errands to run, I can start into the game while Mystical Munchies is exporting exporting from Adobe and or uploading to YouTube, depending on what game I end up putting on the channel for that given week. Speaking of that game group, the next logical concern is with that every other Saturday game group, but that's easy to address also by varying the size of the games in question. On a Saturday where I don't have group game day, naturally the game would be bigger, but where I do have group game day, the game would be smaller. So essentially, the easiest way to look at this is on a Saturday where I do have a group game day, then I would have the Saturday game would essentially look like another Sunday. Whereas when I do have group game Saturday, then essentially it's like I have 2 Wednesdays in terms of the channel games, because then the game will naturally get a little bit smaller when I don't have the time to fall back on to really do a bigger game. Sunday would obviously still be your bigger games, but what I'm thinking now is if I go ahead with adding Saturday, and I'm not completely sure I'm going to yet, I'm going to have to give that some thought, I would probably make Wednesday into a small campaign night. So this would be where I'd feature playthroughs of, say, your Leader games or your Historic Wings. This could be a way I could dive into Mag 23 Guadalcanal a lot more, but I will have to give that some thought. Now, I don't expect to do anything with that idea immediately after the 91 Payoff Pitch replay is over, mainly because I want to take some time off from the increased content, and I want to spend some time at a little more normal content schedule after the replay is over, and I want to be able to play some games for pleasure. So I do have quite a few games, as you've probably seen, that I want to catch up on learning after my 91 replay is over. But with that musing out of the way, now we can talk about what's coming in July. And as is something of a tradition on the channel, we're going to devote the month of July to space games, except, of course, for the continuation of the 1991 playoffs in Payoff Pitch Baseball. And in the immediate aftermath of this video, tomorrow we're going to have Game 3 of the ALCS between the Oakland Athletics and the Kansas City Royals, as that series shifts to Kansas City. Thursday we're going to be very busy on the channel. At the very least, we're going to have Game 3 of the NLCS between the Dodgers and the Pirates, as that series shifts to Los Angeles. Oakland and Pittsburgh lead their respective series 2-0. So that won't be our only game on Thursday, but we'll come back to that when we get a little bit closer to it. As for Sundays in the month, we're going to start off with game number 6 on my Tack Up Wargaming list as we play Space Empires 4X from GMT Games. Next, we're back to the Star Wars universe again as we play Star Wars Outer Rim. We're then back to our solar system again as we play Space Corp 2025 to 2300 AD, also from GMT Games. Last up for Sundays, we're going to pay another visit to the Terra Mystica universe as we play Gaia Project. As for Wednesdays, we'll start off with Star Realms before following that up with a brand new debut on the channel as we play Astro Knights. I've heard that it's mostly Anne's End in space, so we'll be learning that for the very first time on the channel, which I normally don't do, but if it's similar enough to Anne's End, I shouldn't have too much problem picking this one up. Next, we'll move back to the Twilight Imperium universe for a game of Twilight Inscription, and then we're back to our solar system again as we play Terraforming Mars, the dice game. We'll then close out the month on a Tuesday for games with the play-in game for the Summer of Lovecraft in August, and I cannot believe that is already coming up. And the play-in game for the Summer of Lovecraft will be Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. I'll explain more about how the Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu is going to serve as the play-in game for the Summer of Lovecraft. As for Mystical Munchies, That will also be taking on a space focus for the month as we revisit a past cookbook. We're going to be cooking out of the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge official Black Spire Outpost cookbook once again. This time we'll be making Cat's Kettle Corn, roasted kajaka root, fried Andorian tip-yip, and zoochberry surprise. With that, we can go ahead and wrap up this video and close out another episode of Pinot with Phoenix. Tomorrow night, as I mentioned, Game 3 of the ALCS between the Royals and the Athletics will be at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. Wednesday, we're playing Star Realms, and then Sunday, we're playing Game 6 on my TACUP Wargaming list as we play Space Empires 4X. Mystical Munchies on Saturday will start with the appetizer, Cat's Kettle Corn. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.